Want to talk to Tom Joscelyn. He's sitting on set with us. He's listening to this breaking news as it comes in. Tom, as you'll be familiar with, is with the Foundation for Defense of Democracy's senior editor of the Long War Journal, which is an excellent source as well for anything terror related. Tom, everyone's looking for connections. Who does this guy work with? Who is he? Where does he come from? What's going through your head as you're listening to the news as it breaks?
Well, the problem here is there are multiple angles that he could be connected to. So until we get some specific data, we don't want to really
Does it
speculate.
matter, Tom? Does it matter who he's connected to if he wants to kill or injure Americans?
I mean, it doesn't matter in terms of the end product of trying to kill or wound Americans, but it matters in terms of investigating the organizations that possibly are in play, for sure. You know, one of the interesting things you said there was that Rahami was well known, or at least known, to federal law enforcement authorities before this. Catherine Herridge has reported that. If you think back to the Orlando attack, San Bernardino, the Boston bombers, in each case there were known suspects who carried out those attacks. They were identified by law enforcement as being a threat beforehand and went on to carry out an attack. And that really speaks to the fact that there are now more threats than ever. And basically the FBI, the intelligence services, are tracking more individuals than ever. And what that does is it means that known wolves, if we want to call them as such, get through. And that's part of the problem here.
It is interesting to mention the Orlando attack as we're just looking preliminarily at any parallels between these attacks. We don't think they're connected, but we do know about Rahami that he has roots to Afghanistan. We knew that about Omar Mateen as well, connections to Afghanistan. And when we look at San Bernardino, there's connections back to the Afghanistan-Pakistan region as well. What do you make of just those ties to that particular part of the world, Tom?
Well, you know, Afghanistan-Pakistan has been the epicenter of jihadism since the 1980s, and that's evolved over time. But the bottom line is it doesn't really surprise us if we find that immigrants or people tied to that region are drawn to the jihadist ideology, because we've seen it over and over again. So again, there's a lot we still have to learn about Rahami here and what exactly went down, but it shouldn't surprise us at all if he has ties to any organizations or is tied digitally to these organizations overseas.
That's something you look at very closely, Tom, the connections online. What have you heard by way of chatter? What have you seen over this weekend, not only from what we're seeing in the New York tri-state area, but also in the attack in Minnesota?
Well, I think there's a difference here between the chatter I've seen in New York, New Jersey. There's been a lot of praise on jihadi websites for it, but I haven't seen any specific claims of responsibility. If you think of what happened in Minnesota, a mock news agency, which is one of the chief propaganda arms of the Islamic State, or ISIS, claimed responsibility for that operation and said that that was a soldier of the caliphate carried it out. Now, that's very significant because more often than not, when a mock claims something, there is a lead there is a tie there back to the mothership. And so that's very important to keep in mind. So that's a big distinction here. You know, in Minnesota, we have a specific claim of responsibility that needs to be investigated further, but I would say that the evidence or the probability is there's more to that story. Here, we're still waiting for such a claim to figure out whether or not this guy has any ties to organizations.